Not sure how to make history relevant to your students? Hello historians and welcome back. I'm Cecilia Tamez and I help overwhelmed history teachers transform into confident facilitators of learning. So I'll be honest, when I first started teaching and I kept hearing talk about, oh, we have to make history relevant for kids, I was like, what? I honestly had zero clue what they were talking about. And not because I didn't know the importance of history. I mean, come on, I'm a licensed historian. I just wasn't sure how they expected me as a teacher to get students engaged, invested, and connected to historical content when I knew deep down in my itty bitty soul that students would probably give me, an eye roll and an apathetic shoulder shrug if I even try to explain the importance of history. So how do we get students to find history relevant, to make it worthy of their attention and participation? By the end of this video, you'll learn several ways that you can use to create instant relevancy for your history course. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions about making history relevant is that everything must have an immediate real-world application. Although we know as history teachers that everything in the past is still relevant and prevalent, not every lesson or activity will have an immediate real-world application. Our subject area is not like math or science, where curiosity or necessity triggers our need to use such content. Our content area is focused on processes and the acquisition of critical thinking skills. So I want to shift your perspective when it comes to thinking of historical relevance from how do I get my students to apply this in quote-unquote real life to how can I teach them essential processes and how can I make it matter to them right now enough so that they're bothered to pay attention. Now, this isn't to say that you can't actually explain some real-world connections between your content and modern day occurrences, but you want to ensure that you are setting up the right questions for the student to make that connection or ask that question versus just listening to you explain the connection. Making our history lessons relevant is really about immediate engagement. So you really want to think about relevancy in terms of creating immediate motivation, interest, or curiosity. Some ways in which you can create that immediate engagement can be by incorporating intriguing storytelling. Now, if you want to see how this direct teaching method is used in an engaging and purposeful way, be sure to check out my video on the lost art of direct instruction, and I'll go ahead and link it up above and down below for you to watch at the end of this video. Chunking content in digestible, processable portions also really helps to give students time to chew on what you're saying and to really be invested in being attentive. Oftentimes when our students are in a class that's not really allowing enough processing time in accordance with their needs, students feel overwhelmed. And rather than trying to keep up, they just shut down. And that's where you see that disengagement happening. Now, the easiest way to make your history content relevant is to design instruction based on student interests, essentially to teach in the way your students learn best. Now, this can be tricky and it does require some experience and knowing your students well, but overall, it is one of the most effective ways to get buy-in from your students. And if you're new here and you don't know, this is exactly one of the concepts that I teach in my self-paced program, Teach Like an Influencer Academy. And if you want to learn a little bit more about this program, submit your info at the link in the description below to get additional details. Now, remember, if it's engaging, that means that it is immediately relevant. If it's relevant, their mind tunes into the lesson. If they're tuned into the lesson, that means that they're paying attention and assimilating the content. And overall, this means that they're more likely to remember what you're teaching them. Now, asking the right questions is another great way to create relevancy in your history class. When we cling to these basic recall questions, you're not leaving any room for historical off-roading. What does that mean? That means that if you train your students to see history in black and white, single answer responses, yes and no, without any opportunity to really explore the content in depth, and students notice this pattern in your assignments, in your questions, in your fishing for a certain answer, then they'll also begin to operate in that mindset as well. What you want to do is ask questions that throw them for a loop. For example, if we're reading about the Declaration of Independence, instead of simply exploring this document from a colonial perspective. Maybe you can assign students to write a response letter from the British perspective, justifying their actions. In this way, you're modeling for students how they can think critically, how to evaluate different perspectives. And when we engage them to think with curiosity, they're actually thinking, which makes them engaged, which suddenly makes this lesson a lot more interesting and relevant. Now, I do want to make perfectly clear that while there are many perspectives to a historical event, they shouldn't be explored without a moral compass. This is something that's becoming increasingly important, and it's something that I talk about in my video, Problem with Teaching History, which I'll go ahead and link up above and down for you to check out after this video. But essentially, when we discuss opposing viewpoints, it's important to have informed and moral context for our students. Otherwise, any historical viewpoint will seem to be worth defending. Making the lesson and learning accessible is another instant way to create relevancy for our history student. As I mentioned earlier in this video, relevance is about making the content important to the student instantaneously. And nothing makes us more invested in what we're doing or being required to do than when we feel that we can actually do it well. This means that we need to ensure that we're giving our students every possible opportunity to participate and feel confident that they can contribute something. So one thing that I highly suggest is having a word wall with visual support that your students are allowed to reference constantly and consistently, allowing students to use notes, handouts, graphic organizers, or allow them to request backup from a buddy are other great ways that you can empower your learners to make them feel confident about their responses. You also definitely want to think in terms of scaffolding. So when planning, you need to remind yourself who your students are. So personalities, strengths, weaknesses, interests, and then ask yourself what you would have to do or modify, what added bonus you would need to provide to ensure that your students are all able to participate and respond at the level that that content demands. For example, if I know that my students have to analyze a primary source, but my students are not strong readers and they don't have the attention span for prolonged, sustained thinking, they wouldn't find reading this document relevant to them, interesting, or engaging. So I would need to design an activity that would allow them movement, stations to chunk the content that would allow more digestible processing of the information, and perhaps allow them to work in partners with clear guidelines for individual participation. Another inadvertent way to create relevancy for our history students is by creating safety and incentivizing. So think of it this way. How can anyone express interest in anything at all if they feel like they're going to be judged in class? The idea here is to make your students feel safe enough so that they're making genuine attempts to participate. You want students to lower their guard so that you can discern what they express a genuine interest in, because that's what you can later use to adjust and refine your instruction. So to create relevancy, you need to create trust. And if you want to know some ways that you can create trust, feel free to check out my video on activities that create trust in your classroom, which I'll link in the description below. You can also create trust and motivation with your students by allowing opportunities for ownership. So maybe this might look like allowing them to choose a project option from a menu of projects. Maybe allowing them to be the teacher, coach other fellow students, praising them for what they did do correctly, and allowing them to be your helper. It sounds simple enough. This show of trust actually goes a long way in motivating our students, making them feel confident, like the content is attainable and therefore relevant and important. Now, if you've watched any video on my channel, you know that I'm a huge supporter of an incentive-based classroom. And if you're also a fan of incentive-based classrooms, comment below and let me know how you incentivize your students. When students feel safe, confident, respected, and motivated, anything you teach will feel relevant simply because you're the one teaching the content. If you enjoyed this video and you want to be part of a growing community of historians, be sure to follow me on Instagram right up here at The Game Plan EduSolutions, or enroll in my newsletter, the History Teacher Help Hotline, in the link down below. I want your success. I'm rooting for you. Until next time, class dismissed.